The Conversation Skills Bible. How to Talk to Anyone, Master Witty Banter, Overcome Social Anxiety, and Become the Most Likable Person in the Room, by Vivian Crane. Introduction. On September 26, 1960, the air inside a television studio in Chicago felt thick and heavy. The bright studio lights were so hot that they made the men on stage sweat. This was the first time in history that people could watch a presidential debate on their TV screens. Two men stood on that stage. One was Richard Nixon. He was a man who had spent years in high-level politics. He was smart, he knew every fact by heart, and he was ready to win an argument. But Nixon had been sick. He looked pale and tired. He chose to wear a light gray suit that was almost the same color as the wall behind him. He looked like he was fading into the background. The other man was John F. Kennedy. He was younger and had much less experience. But Kennedy understood something that Nixon did not. He knew that when people look at you, they don't just hear your words. They read your energy. Kennedy had spent time in the sun, so he looked healthy. He wore a dark suit that made him stand out clearly against the studio walls. He looked directly into the camera lens, as if he were talking to a single person in their living room. When the debate ended, something strange happened. People who listened to the debate on the radio thought Richard Nixon had won. They heard his facts and his logic, and they were impressed. But the millions of people who watched the debate on TV had a totally different reaction. They overwhelmingly thought Kennedy had won. It wasn't because of what Kennedy said. It was because of how he made people feel. He looked like a leader. He looked comfortable. He looked like someone you would want to talk to at a party. This moment changed history forever. It proved that the way we communicate is about much more than just the words we choose. The quiet wall. Many of us feel like Richard Nixon in that studio. We have the facts. We are good at our jobs. We have interesting thoughts inside our heads. But when we stand in front of someone new, or when we walk into a room full of people, we feel like we are fading into the gray paint on the wall. You might know the feeling of the blank mind. You are talking to someone you want to impress, and suddenly, your brain just stops. It feels like a computer that has frozen. You search for something, anything to say, but all you find is silence. Your heart beats faster. Your palms get a little sweaty. You end up nodding and saying yeah over and over again until the other person finds an excuse to walk away. It is a lonely feeling to be a social ghost. You are there in the room, but nobody really sees you. You see other people laughing and sharing stories. They seem to have a secret code that you don't know. You might tell yourself that you are just not a people person. This is the big lie we tell ourselves to feel better about being shy. We think that being likable is something you are born with, like having blue eyes or being tall. We think that some people are just naturals, and the rest of us are stuck watching from the sidelines. But social skill is not a gift. It is a tool. Just like riding a bike, playing a video game, or writing code, it is something you can learn, part by part. You don't need a new brain. You just need a software update. The man who buffered. In a high-rise office in Seattle, Marcus Dorn sat at his desk. It was a Tuesday morning, and the gray clouds outside matched the gray carpet of the fintech company where he worked as a senior systems engineer. Marcus was 32 years old, and he was arguably the smartest person in his department. Give him a broken line of code, and he could fix it in minutes. But give him a happy hour at a rooftop bar, and he fell apart. Marcus lived alone with a very large Maine Coon cat named Pixel. Pixel was a great listener, but he didn't require much in the way of witty banter. At work, Marcus was known as the guy who always had his headphones on. He wasn't mean. He was just terrified of the small talk that happened in the break room. A few weeks ago, Marcus had applied for the lead engineer role. He was the obvious choice. He had the most experience and the best technical record. But on Monday, his boss called him into the office. "Marcus, you're brilliant," his boss said, looking a little uncomfortable. "But the VP of engineering feels you lack the soft skills to lead a team. A leader needs to be able to bridge the gap between the basement and the boardroom. They need to be someone people want to follow. Right now, most of the team barely knows your name." That night, Marcus went to the company's monthly social event at a nearby bar. He stood by the buffet table, holding a craft beer so tightly his knuckles turned white. He watched a junior developer, a guy who had only been there 6 months, laughing with the CEO. The junior developer wasn't saying anything genius, he was just talking. Marcus rehearsed a hello in his head. Hi, I'm Marcus from Systems. No, that's too boring. Hey, how about that weather? No, that's a cliché. He overthought it for 10 minutes. By the time he finally felt ready to step forward, the group had moved to the other side of the room. Marcus finished his beer, looked at his phone to pretend he was busy, and left early. As he walked to his car, he felt a familiar weight in his chest. He felt like he was watching his life through a window. He was there, but he wasn't part of it. He felt like a social ghost. Building the bridge. The reason Marcus struggled wasn't because he was boring. It was because he viewed conversation as a high-stakes test he had to pass. He thought he had to be perfect. Most people think of a conversation as a performance. They think they are on a stage, and everyone is judging them. But that is not what a conversation is. A conversation is actually more like a bridge. Imagine that every person in the world is an island. You are on your island, and I am on mine. Between us is a big, cold ocean of silence. If we stay on our islands, we are safe, but we are also alone. To connect, we have to build a bridge. A social architect knows how to build that bridge. They don't wait for someone else to start. They have a blueprint. They know how to lay the first stone, how to make the structure strong, and how to make it beautiful, so that people want to walk across it. This book is that blueprint. It is designed to take you from being a social ghost like Marcus to being a social architect who can enter any room with a quiet, steady confidence. We are going to use a concept called the social thermostat. You probably let the temperature of the room control you. If the room is cold and quiet, you stay cold and quiet. If the room is hot and loud, you feel overwhelmed and hide. A social architect doesn't just react to the temperature. They set the temperature. They know how to warm up a cold conversation and how to cool down a tense argument. They are in control of the room because they are in control of themselves. Why this works? You might be wondering why you should trust these ideas. This isn't just a book of tips or tricks, like imagine everyone is in their underwear. By the way, don't do that. It's distracting and it doesn't help. The methods in this book are based on 3 things. History. We will look at people who weren't born charismatic, but forced themselves to learn. We will follow Benjamin Franklin, who started as an annoying, argumentative young man and turned himself into the most popular diplomat in the world. We will follow Eleanor Roosevelt, who was so shy as a child that she was nicknamed Granny, yet grew up to lead the world in human rights. Science. We will look at the 3 V's of communication: visual, vocal, and verbal. This is based on the Moravian model, which shows that what you say is actually the least important part of a first impression. We will look at how your brain syncs up with someone else's brain when you tell a good story. Practice. We will follow Marcus as he tries these techniques in the real world. You will see him fail. You will see him get awkward, and you will see him finally figure out how to update his software. Social skill is mechanical. It has parts. Once you understand the parts, the fear starts to go away. Fear usually comes from the unknown. Once you know exactly what to do when a conversation hits a dead end, you won't be afraid of the silence anymore. The journey ahead. We are going to start by fixing the engine. Before you can talk to a CEO or a stranger at a bar, you have to stop your brain from panicking. We will look at why your brain wants you to stay quiet. It's actually an old survival trick from when we lived in caves. Back then, being kicked out of the group meant you would probably be eaten by a tiger. Your brain thinks that saying something stupid is a life or death emergency. We are going to teach your brain that it's okay to be seen. Then, we will move into the first 10 seconds. This is where you learn the physical moves, like the eyebrow flash and the floodlight smile, that tell people you are a friend, not a threat. Once the door is open, we will dive into the skills that keep it open. Presence, how to use your voice and your body so that people actually listen when you speak. The threading technique, how to never run out of things to say by picking up small clues in what other people tell you. Active listening, how to listen in a way that makes people feel like they are the only person in the world. This is the secret of the most likable people. Witty banter, we will break wit down into simple patterns. You don't have to be a comedian to be funny. You just have to know how to misdirect a sentence. Persuasion, how to use your new skills to get a yes at work and in your personal life. By the time you reach the end of this book, you won't just have more friends or a better job. You will have a different way of looking at the world. You will realize that every person you meet is an opportunity to build a bridge. Marcus Thorne is still in Seattle. He is still worried about his lead engineer role. He is still sitting at home with Pixel the cat, wondering if he can ever really change. He is about to walk into a cross-departmental meeting that he usually tries to skip. He doesn't know it yet, but he is about to stop buffering. It is time to stop being a ghost in your own life. It is time to start building. The first stone of the bridge is right here. Chapter 1: The Social Anxiety Paradox. Why your brain wants you to stay quiet. From a high window in a New York City townhouse in the late 1890s, the world looked like a series of moving parts. Carriage wheels crunched against the cobblestones. Men in tall silk hats hurried toward the financial district. Women in heavy layered dresses glided into shops. To an observer on the street, it was just a busy morning. But to a young girl peering through the glass, it was a terrifying machine she didn't know how to operate. She stood back from the window, hoping no one would notice her. She was tall for her age, with a chin that tucked into her chest and eyes that stayed glued to the floor. When guests arrived for tea, she would often hide in the pantry or behind a heavy velvet curtain. Her mother, a beautiful woman who moved through rooms like a queen, didn't call her by her name. She called her Granny. It was a cruel joke about how serious, stiff, and plain the girl seemed. This girl was Eleanor Roosevelt. Most people today remember her as a world leader, a woman who stood on stages and spoke to millions. But in those early years, she was the social ghost. She felt like she was born with a broken radio in her head. While everyone else seemed to hear the music of conversation, she only heard static. She believed she was destined to stay quiet because her brain was simply wired to be afraid. The myth of the natural-born talker. Most of us grow up believing a story that isn't true. We look at the person who commands the room at a party or the coworker who always has the perfect joke, and we think they were born that way. We assume they have a charisma chip installed in their brain that we didn't get. This is the great myth of communication. It suggests that being good with people is like having blue eyes or being tall. You either have it or you don't. Because we believe this myth, we treat our social anxiety like a life sentence. When our heart starts to race before a phone call, or our mind goes blank when a stranger says hello, we tell ourselves, this is just who I am. We view our quietness as a shield that keeps us safe from embarrassment. The truth is much more interesting. Science shows that social skill is a muscle, not a gift. Even more surprising is the fact that your brain actually wants you to be afraid. It isn't trying to make your life miserable, it's trying to keep you alive. The paralyzing fear Eleanor felt in those New York hallways wasn't a sign that she was broken. It was a sign that her brain was working exactly as it had for thousands of years. The caveman in the office. To understand why your mind goes blank, you have to look back much further than your childhood. You have to look back to a time when humans lived in small groups on the open plains. In those days, being liked by the group wasn't about being popular at a party. If the group decided they didn't like you, they might kick you out. Without the protection of the tribe, you couldn't hunt, you couldn't stay warm, and you certainly couldn't defend yourself against a hungry lion. Your brain learned that social rejection was a signal of impending death. Fast forward to today. When you walk into a networking event or stand up to give a presentation, your modern brain knows you aren't going to be eaten by a lion. However, the ancient part of your brain, the amygdala, doesn't know the difference. It sees a room full of strangers and screams, "Danger, they might not like us. If they don't like us, we die." This is why your palms get sweaty and your voice shakes. Your body is pumping out adrenaline to help you fight a monster or run away from a fire. But since there's no monster to fight, that energy has nowhere to go. It stays trapped in your chest, making you feel like you're vibrating. Your brain shuts down your clever thinking centers because it thinks you need all your energy for survival. You don't need to be witty when you're running for your life. That's why you can't think of a single thing to say. Marcus and the Sunday Night Dread. In a small apartment in Seattle, Marcus Thorne sat on his couch, staring at his laptop. The blue light reflected off his glasses, making him look even paler than usual. It was Sunday night, and a single email from his boss had ruined his entire weekend. Cross-departmental strategy meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. The email read, "Marcus, please be ready to explain the new server architecture to the marketing team." Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his throat. He was a brilliant engineer. He could see patterns in code that no one else noticed. But the thought of standing in a room with the marketing team, people who dressed well and laughed loudly, made him feel like he was back in middle school. He looked over at his Maine Coon cat, Pixel, who was stretched out on the rug. I could just call in sick, Marcus whispered. It would be so easy. He had been protecting himself like this for years. He stayed in his cubicle. He ate lunch at his desk. He avoided the break room when he heard voices inside. He realized with a sudden pang of sadness that he had built a very small life. By avoiding the things that made him nervous, he had accidentally built a cage. He was safe, but he was also invisible. He was the social ghost of the office, and it was costing him the lead engineer role he had worked so hard for. For the first time, the pain of staying quiet felt bigger than the fear of speaking up. The girl who found her voice. Eleanor Roosevelt's life changed when she was 15. She was sent away to Allenswood, a boarding school in England. She arrived as a lonely, shy girl with no confidence. She expected to be the same invisible person she had always been. But the headmistress of the school, a woman named Marie Souvestre, saw something in Eleanor that the girl hadn't seen in herself. Marie didn't try to make Eleanor less shy. Instead, she taught Eleanor that her sensitivity was actually a superpower. She showed Eleanor that because she was so worried about what others thought, she was actually very good at noticing how other people felt. Eleanor began to realize that she wasn't the only one who was afraid. She looked at the other girls and realized many of them were just as lonely or nervous as she was. This was the birth of what we call the bridge builder's blueprint. Instead of viewing a conversation as a performance where she had to be perfect, Eleanor started to view it as a way to build a bridge between two islands. She stopped asking herself, "What do they think of me?" and started asking, "How can I make them feel more comfortable?" This shift changed everything. When you focus on the other person, your own anxiety begins to fade. Your brain stops looking for lions and starts looking for planks to build your bridge. By the time Eleanor left school, she was no longer the girl hiding behind the curtain. She was a leader. The spotlight effect. You aren't that interesting. One of the biggest reasons we stay quiet is a psychological trap called the spotlight effect. We walk into a room and feel like there is a giant bright light shining directly on us. We think everyone is noticing our slightly messy hair, the way we tripped on the rug, or the fact that we just stumbled over a word. In the 1990s, researchers at Cornell University proved this is all in our heads. They had a student wear a cringe-worthy t-shirt with a picture of the singer that was considered very uncool at the time. The student had to walk into a room full of other people. The student was sure that at least half of the people in the room would notice the embarrassing shirt. In reality, only about 20% even saw it. The rest of the people were too busy thinking about their own hair, their own clothes, and their own problems. The lesson is simple. People aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. They are the stars of their own movies, and you are just a background character in their story. This sounds a bit harsh, but it is actually the most liberating news you will ever hear. If no one is watching that closely, you are free to make mistakes. You are free to be awkward. You are free to be human. The amusement park effect. Think about the last time you were truly terrified. Maybe you were at the top of a roller coaster, right before the big drop. Your heart was pounding, your breath was shallow. Your hands were gripping the bar so hard, your knuckles turned white. Now, think about the last time you were incredibly excited. Maybe it was the night before a big trip, or right before you opened a great gift. If you look closely, the physical feelings are almost exactly the same. In both cases, your heart beats fast. In both cases, you feel butterflies in your stomach. The only difference is the label your brain puts on those feelings. When you feel those symptoms before a conversation, your brain usually labels them as anxiety. You tell yourself, "I am nervous," and your body responds by trying to hide. But high-level communicators use a trick called cognitive reappraisal. They use the amusement park effect. Instead of saying, "I am nervous," they say, "I am excited." A famous study at Harvard Business School asked people to give a speech in front of a cold, judging audience. One group was told to say, "I am calm." Another group was told to say, "I am excited." The excited group was rated as more persuasive, more confident, and more competent by the judges. They didn't change their heart rate. They didn't stop their hands from shaking. They just changed the label. They treated the conversation like a roller coaster ride instead of a tiger attack. Building the first plank. If you want to stop being a social ghost, you don't need to change your personality. You just need to start building your bridge, one plank at a time. The first plank is the most important, accepting the static. When you enter a social situation and your mind goes blank, stop fighting it. Don't panic because you're panicking. That just creates a loop of fear that never ends. Instead, acknowledge it. Tell yourself, my brain thinks there's a lion in the room. That's okay. It's just trying to protect me. Once you stop fighting the feeling, the adrenaline has nowhere to go but down. This is how you take control of your social thermostat. Most people let the room decide how they feel. If the room is loud and intimidating, they turn their own temperature down to stay hidden. If the room is cold and quiet, they freeze up. A social architect does the opposite. They decide what the temperature should be. They realize that they can be the one to bring the warmth. On Monday morning, Marcus stood outside the conference room. He could hear the marketing team inside. They were laughing about a commercial they had seen over the weekend. Normally, Marcus would have waited until the last possible second to enter, hoping to slip into a chair unnoticed. But he remembered the amusement park effect. He felt his heart thumping against his ribs. He felt the sweat on his palms. "I'm not nervous," he whispered to the closed door. "I'm just ready. This is the drop on the roller coaster." He also thought about the spotlight effect. He realized that the people inside weren't waiting to judge his server architecture explanation. They were probably worried about their own presentations or thinking about what they wanted for lunch. He wasn't the star of their movie. He was just the guy with the data they needed. He reached for the door handle. He didn't feel like a master of charisma yet. He still felt like the guy who liked coding more than people. But he wasn't going to call in sick. He was going to walk in, find a seat, and try to build one small bridge. The historical echo. Years after she left that boarding school in England, Eleanor Roosevelt found herself in a place far removed from the high society tea parties of her youth. She was standing at the edge of a dark, soot-covered hole in the ground in West Virginia. It was the entrance to a coal mine. The men coming out of the mine were covered in black dust. They were tired, hungry, and angry. They had no reason to like a woman like Eleanor, a woman of wealth and privilege who spoke with a fancy accent. The lions in this situation were very real. The tension was thick enough to taste. If Eleanor had stayed the granny of her childhood, she would have stayed in the car. She would have let her anxiety tell her that she didn't belong. But she had learned the secret of the bridge. She walked right up to the miners. She didn't give a speech. She didn't try to be clever. She just looked them in the eye and asked them about their lives. She used her empathy to find the Me Too moments. She talked to them about their children and their hopes for the future. By the time she left, the miners weren't seeing a first lady. They were seeing a person who had built a bridge to meet them where they were. The paralyzing fear you feel in your own life, whether it's at a party, in a meeting, or talking to a stranger at a coffee shop, is the same fear Eleanor felt. It is a biological relic of a time when we needed to hide to survive. But we don't live in caves anymore. We live in a world that is hungry for connection. Your brain will tell you to stay quiet. It will tell you that it's safer to be invisible. It will try to convince you that you don't have the charisma chip. Don't believe it. The static in your head isn't a wall. It's just the sound of the engine starting. The only question is, where are you going to drive? Chapter 2. Mastering the First 10 Seconds. You have exactly 10 seconds. The clock starts the moment you turn the corner and see them standing there. It might be a hiring manager by the elevators. It could be a stranger at a birthday party. It could even be the neighbor you've lived next to for 3 years but never actually spoken to. In the time it takes to tie a shoelace, their brain is going to perform a high-speed scan of your entire existence. They aren't doing it because they are mean or judgmental. They are doing it because they are human. Deep inside the oldest part of the brain, a tiny alarm system is asking 3 questions at lightning speed. Are you a threat? Are you important? Are you a friend? By the time you open your mouth to say hello, the verdict is already in. If you fail the 10-second test, you will spend the next hour trying to climb out of a hole you didn't even know you dug. But if you master those first few ticks of the clock, the rest of the conversation feels like walking downhill with the wind at your back. The printer's problem. In 1727, a 21-year-old man named Benjamin Franklin was walking the cobblestone streets of Philadelphia, and he was frustrated. He was one of the smartest people in the city. He was a hard worker. He was a talented printer, but he had a major problem. People didn't really like being around him. At the time, Franklin was what his friends called disputatious. This is a fancy way of saying he loved to argue. He was so sharp and so quick with his words that he would pounce on any mistake someone made. If you said the sky was blue, he would find a reason to tell you why you were technically wrong. He thought he was winning because he was right. In reality, he was losing because he was making everyone else feel small. Franklin realized that his technical skills, his ability to set type and run a printing press, would only take him so far. If he wanted to build a business or a library or a fire department, he needed people to want to help him. He needed a network. He decided to start a club called the Junto. It was a group of young men who would meet every Friday night to talk about books, politics, and how to improve their lives. But before the first meeting, Franklin realized something vital. If he walked into that room as the same arrogant "I'm always right" guy, the club wouldn't last a month. He had to change his social entrance. He had to learn how to walk into a room and make people feel safe and respected before he even finished his first sentence. He started practicing a new way of greeting people. He traded his sharp edges for a warm, non-threatening demeanor. He stopped trying to win the first 10 seconds and started trying to invite the other person into a shared space. The Junto lasted for 30 years and became the foundation for almost everything Franklin achieved. He learned that the way you enter a room sets the temperature for everything that follows. He stopped being a person who cooled the room down with his cold intellect and became the person who warmed it up with his presence. The science of the thin slice. We often think we need a long time to get to know someone. We think our opinions are based on deep thoughts and careful observation. Science says otherwise. In the 1990s, a researcher named Nalini Ambady conducted a study that shocked the world of psychology. She took video recordings of college professors teaching their classes. Then she cut those videos down into thin slices, clips that were only 10 seconds long. She even turned off the sound so the viewers couldn't hear what the professors were saying. She showed these silent 10-second clips to a group of students who had never met the professors. She asked them to rate the teachers on things like confidence, warmth, and effectiveness. Then she compared those 10-second ratings to the actual evaluations written by students who had spent an entire semester in that professor's classroom. The results were mind-blowing. The ratings from the people who saw only 10 seconds of silent video were almost identical to the ratings from the students who had sat through months of lectures. Our brains are thin slicing machines. We make up our minds about someone's character, power, and kindness before they even get to the middle of their first story. This is why mastering the launch of a conversation is the most important skill you can have. You are either handing someone a map that says, "I am a friend," or you are handing them a warning sign. The social launch pad. To make sure your 10 seconds always go interested and confident. The first part of the launch is the eyebrow flash. This is a tiny split-second movement where you raise your eyebrows and then lower them. It happens so fast you might miss it if you aren't looking for it. Joe Navarro, a former FBI agent who spent decades studying body language, calls this the universal friend signal. Across almost every culture on Earth, an eyebrow flash says, "I see you, and I'm not a threat." When we see someone we like, we do it automatically. By doing it on purpose when you approach someone, you are sending a subconscious green light to their brain. The second part is the belly button rule. Think about how you stand when you are nervous. Most of us turn our bodies slightly away. We might point our toes toward the exit. We protect our center. The belly button rule is simple. Always point your navel directly at the person you are talking to. This is a powerful signal of total presence. It tells the other person that they have your full attention. When your body is angled away, it looks like you are looking for someone better to talk to. When you square up, it looks like you are exactly where you want to be. The third part is the floodlight smile. Most people use a quick smile. They see someone, they flash their teeth for a half second, and then the smile vanishes. This often looks fake or nervous. A floodlight smile is different. When you make eye contact, you pause for just a beat, maybe half a second. Then you let a big, warm smile flood across your face and into your eyes. This slight delay makes the smile feel like it's specifically for them, rather than just a mask you wear for everyone. Marcus and the espresso machine. Back in Seattle, Marcus Thorne was trying to put these pieces together. For years, the office break room had been a place of high anxiety for him. It was a narrow room with a high-end espresso machine that took a long time to grind the beans. That meant there was always a dead zone of about 45 seconds where you had to stand next to someone and exist. In the past, Marcus would handle this by staring intensely at his phone. He would pretend to be very interested in his email until the coffee was done. He thought he was being polite by not bothering people. He didn't realize that his closed-off body language was actually making people uncomfortable. He was setting the social thermostat to cold. On a Tuesday morning, Marcus walked into the break room and saw Sarah, the head of marketing.